Okay, you can start now.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Today we have Charles Dickens facts. Why Charles Dickens a special writer? Charles Dickens is an iconic figure. In the 19th century, the world witnessed the birth of one of the greatest writers the world knew, whether at the level of the English language and other language. What distinguished Dickens is that having a special way of writing that made him, along with Shakespeare, from those who added words and phrases to the English language that are used to this day. Painful and cruel memories. Those memories have always been a source of inspiration and a turning point in the lives of reformers. He had the ability of memorizing and remembering the most complex details as he works to employ those scenes in his novels that he writes. We find this in his novel, David Copperfield, where the character ideas and ambition of Copperfield resemble that of Dickens, and this is what made it considered the story of his life. Working in a factory, the harsh conditions of life, his father's imprisonment, and other similarities had a negative impact on his life. The first thing that his fiction writings achieved were reforms represented in closing notorious prisons in which prisoners are brutally treated, and that because of his novel Cook's Papers. Now, education is a tool of changing thought and the principles. All of what Dickens wrote about schools represented and conveyed a negative image of their falling system, beginning with his childhood days at school, which he was not happy with, and here came the role of his novels in conveying the suffering of children, as they were terrified to go to school due to the feeling of frustration and unhappiness with learning boring facts and nothing else, in addition to the bad treatment the student received. This appears in his novel, Nicholas Nickleby, where the headmaster of the school, Mr. Squares, who deals very harshly with the students, and his wife, who constantly reprimands them. In his other novel, Hard Times, he shows the character of Mr. Thomas Gradgrind, who is very strict in every detail of life, where he doesn't allow any imagination, whether with pupils or his children, with Louisa and Tom. The best use of imagination is creativity. Dickens is one of those writers who encourages a wild imagination and adds to the joy, pleasure, and happiness. This appears in his novel *The Christmas Carol*, where the story, like the stony old miser Scrooge, who eventually softens his heart and sends food to Tim's little house. Money doesn't buy happiness. We find other narrations, on the contrary, they talk about separated families who do not know anything about feelings and sensations, as in Hard Times, the subject of marriage. For example, when Mr. Bunbury proposes to Louisa, it becomes clear to us that everything is passed on money, prestige, lineage, social class. On the other hand, we find Tom, who he took advantage of this case because that Bunderby is interested in his sister, so he asked his sister to marry him. And though she doesn't like Bunderby, but we see that Tom character is he's a selfish and a controlling character because just to smooth his way. This gives the opposite of what he was telling his sister about that she loves her very much. Everyone is exposed to the toll of ignorance and poverty. We add to this the extreme poverty suffering from difficult living conditions, humiliating working conditions that the slum people used to live in, not forgetting prisons and orphanages, where his novel Oliver Twist was a clear example of the cruelty of living.
Dickens was not afraid to speak his mind. One of the facts that about Charles Dickens that he wasn't afraid to speak his mind. So he talked about many topics in his novel, like hard times, like poverty, the affection of industrialization, and tension between the poor and the rich. social classes, and patriarchal society. Patriarchal society has been a significant issue for the women since centuries. Even the element exists in the 21st century. The victim of patriarchal society are not only limited to women, rather children or slave and domestic workers from under the umbrella. Then the concept of patriarchal society is not limited only to the house. It's applied to the institution who hire women, and the one who faces discrimination in very walk of life because women are thought to be inferior and men are considered superior. Men are the head of the house and have the authority to make rules in such societies. Women are powerless and have limited human rights. So Dickens like rarely considered as a feminist writer that he believed that God created men and women different, then let them remain each in their own position.
Yes, in the novel Hard Times, the concept of patriarchal society could be observed by the main female characters, Louisa Gradgrind, Mrs. Sparsit, and Sissy Job. Sissy was under the influence of patriarchal society. She was abounded by her father, and at the same time, she lived with Mr. Gradgrind, who tried to change her because he was not satisfied with her imaginary way of thinking, which does not indicate the facts. He tried to make out of her another girl with the thinks who thinks differently, a girl who thinks of facts and nothing else, just like his daughter Louisa. And as for Louisa, is the girl most subjected to patriarchy. Her character was not strong, but rather weak. She's controlled. She's controlled by her father, who fills her world with only facts, and he treats her like a person without feelings. Louisa's character is so weak that she did not refuse her father's request to marry Bounderby, even though he's decades older than her, and also that she doesn't like him. When he kissed her on her cheek once, she wiped her cheek for a while and wished she would cut her cheek with a knife. And this proves that Louisa doesn't like Bounderby, and this indicates the weakness of her character because she could not refuse to marry someone that she doesn't like. And in addition, her brother persuaded her to marry for his own benefit.
So in conclusion, these three characters represent the patriarchal society of that society when the novel was written. And this clearly showed the circumstances of the society when the element of a political society was intense and women were not allowed to work freely. And their decision had no right for marriage. It caused more harm than good. It made the life of the character miserable instead of making them happy and delighted. If we want to see any society to be satisfied, the element of patriarchal should come to the end, and people under the effect of patriarchal should be allowed to take decisions without being controlled by women-dominated society. Women play an essential role to develop a society, and they should have power for making decisions that can affect their future, not powerless that has shown in this novel and this presentation. Thank you. If there's any question, you can go ahead.
Students, do you have any question for your colleagues?